Thank you, Acting Speaker. And that was a tour of Ivanhoe. So thank you to the Minister for Police. I will give you a tour of Kew. I mean, we started with Kew High School, so we have a good start there. And I have to say, my mum just texted me, in fact, and for some bizarre reason, she tuned into the house. And she did say, this man just keeps repeating himself. So you had one spectator, but congratulations on making it for 30 minutes. But really, I think the question is, Acting Speaker, is where's Ben? Where is the Minister for Education? Where is the Minister
Correct
for
titles,
Education?
please.
Where is the Minister for Education, the member for Niddrie, tonight talking about the education state? He's thrown his colleague, his friend, in here to speak for 30 minutes on this motion. And where is he? Where is he? I'm sure he is here, like all of us. So we're looking forward to him coming in and speaking to the education state. Because, Acting Speaker, if we look at the data, when it comes to Victoria, only a few weeks ago was there data that demonstrated that Victoria has the least government funding when it comes to government schools than any other state and territory in Australia. Any other state or territory. $16,000 per student compared to $18,000 for the national average. So it's all very well and good to speak about programs and access to certain programs that some students in the state have, but if you don't fully fund our schools here in Victoria, our government schools, then students don't have access to the best educational opportunities. Yep. And how do we know that? Because our educational outcomes are in decline. Year after year, our NAPLAN results, our international results in this state, demonstrate that our students are not getting the education they deserve. If you look at our NAPLAN results from last year, 30%, 1 in 3 Victorian students are not meeting numeracy or literacy standards in this state. 1 in 3 in the state of Victoria are not meeting proficiency standards when it comes to maths or to English. That is an absolute blight on this government. The fact that this government cannot fully fund our schools means that our students cannot access the education that they deserve. And while our schools here in Victoria have the lowest government funding of any state or territory in this country, we also see that our parents, our families, are forced in this state to pay the second highest fees and charges when it comes to sending their children to government schools. The second highest. And it is the highest when it comes to primary schools. The highest voluntary contributions, fees and charges for families to send their children to schools in Victoria. That is because, under this government, they are not fully funding schools in this state. They are, in fact, the least funded when it comes to any state or territory in this country. This government, in fact, and this minister had to go cap in hand to the federal government to help them out. Cap in hand to the federal Labor government to say, we can't afford to fully fund our schools in this state. We have managed the book so poorly in this state that we cannot fully fund our schools. That is why the data does not lie, Acting Speaker. On average, a student in Victoria receives $16,900 compared to the national average of $18,500. That is the difference between the national average and what a student here in Victoria receives, the lowest of any state or territory. So the minister went to Canberra and said, can you help me? Can you help me out? We cannot afford it here in Victoria. We cannot afford it because we have had $50 billion worth of cost blowouts on major projects. $50 billion as a result of corruption on major projects. Corruption when it comes to funneling money to the CFMEU, to bikies, to organised crime. That is the result of making decisions in this state that help out your mates in the union movement instead of putting them into essential services. Essential services. Teachers, those say opposite. Our teachers are the lowest paid in Australia. Our teachers are the lowest paid in Australia in this state. So when we have a situation where our government schools have the lowest funding of any state or territory, according to the Productivity Commission, not according to me, not according to us, according to the Productivity Commission, and you have the lowest paid teachers in this state, is it any wonder that we have a teacher exodus, that we have teachers leaving the profession in droves? How many vacancies in Victoria today when it comes to teachers? How many? 1,000 teacher vacancies across the state. 1,000 teacher vacancies across the state. So if they do not able to fill teachers in classrooms, what does that mean? Consequences for students. Consequences for students. It means that they are not getting the best education. And where is that borne out? In our results, with 1 in 3 Victorian students not being proficient when it comes to numeracy and literacy in this state. Of course, Acting Speaker, we have seen time and time again this government talk about the education state. But on every metric, we are in reverse. Whether it's the teacher shortage crisis, whether it is the fact we have the least funding when it comes to government schools, and of course, when it comes to what this government has done in terms of creating division in this state, school choice, we have seen this government put a tax on independent and Catholic schools. And I note the member for Ivanhoe, as he gave us a tour of his electorate and went school by school, didn't mention a number of schools in his electorate that really are feeling the pinch. We didn't hear about Ivanhoe Girls Grammar that I visited very recently. We didn't hear about Ivanhoe Grammar that are subject to this government's tax on schools, their schools tax, a cost of living crisis, and this government is adding thousands of dollars to school fees in this state. School fees in this state. School fees in this state are being put up as a direct result of this government's mismanagement. They have decided to tax education. So they come in here and they talk about programs that they've had to put in place because they've had to make cuts in every other aspect of government services. In a horror budget last year, they had to come to the table at the 11th hour and say, what is something we can distract from everything else that we're cutting from? What is something that we can distract when it comes to the fact we don't fully fund our schools, that we have the lowest paid teachers in this state? Let's talk about a school saving bonus. A school saving bonus. A school saving bonus that this government isn't even paying its bills for.
How can you have a go at the school
A school saving bonus whereby small...
Order. So, Member for Kew to continue.
A school saving bonus where small businesses are meeting their obligations, providing uniforms, providing whatever it may be, and this government is failing to pay those invoices. Tens of thousands of dollars the Department of Education is not paying. Tens of thousands of dollars because this government cannot afford to pay its bills. In fact, it took the Premier to step in and say, that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. To tell the Minister for Education, her Deputy Premier, to make sure he's actually paying his bills on time. Because when small businesses in this state are doing it incredibly tough, the worst place in Australia to do business, the worst place, this government cannot even pay its bills on time. Acting Speaker, we heard from the member for Ivanhoe about the incredible capital investment he's seen in various schools in his electorate. Well, it's lucky that the member for Ivanhoe has seen some funds flow into his electorate, because for many of us, we haven't seen that. And I visited with the member for Nepean. I've visited Red Hill Primary, Dramana Secondary College. These are schools that are in desperate need.
Eastbourne, yeah. Do you want to talk about Eastbourne?
Desperate need for upgrades. Eastbourne Primary. In fact, we were speaking about it today.
You want to talk about Eastbourne Primary?
We were speaking about it today. A a school that has been waiting for desperately needed upgrades and is still waiting. Q High, that has asbestos in its roof, asbestos that this government is refusing to remove, despite relentless requests by the school, by me, to the minister, by the member for Ivanhoe, to say this school has raised $1.2 million through its own fundraising to updo its classrooms, upgrade its classrooms, and this government is not coming to the table for the $60,000 it will take to remove the asbestos that are in those classrooms, preventing the school with its own fundraising to do what it needs to upgrade those facilities. A school that has its roof collapsing. We want to do a tour. Canterbury Girls Secondary College had a wall fall down while students were at school. Bricks crumbling, thousands of students on site, and nothing has been invested in that school. Kew East Primary, for decades, has seen no capital funding into that school. Again, classrooms full of asbestos. Balwyn Primary School, doubled in size since 2011, does not have enough toilet facilities. Yet this government refuses time and time again to actually invest in upgrades, because they talk about governing for everyone. They talk about governing for the whole state, but it's governing for their own electorates, and that's it. And that's why, in last year's budget, we saw 29 school upgrades unfunded. On the eve of the last election, this government made commitments to upgrade 89 schools and to deliver those upgrades by the next election. Well, with 18 months to go and 29 still unfunded and another 25 not even at the tender stage, I think there is not much hope that they will be delivered before the next election. Not before the next election. Acting Speaker, this government talks a big game when it comes to cost of living. But if you look on any metric, this state is in decline and Victorians are feeling the pinch. It is a cost of living crisis. We went from 1999 to be, in terms of our real GSP per capita, above the national average, 1.7% above. We have fallen 11.5% below the national average. Victorian household income has fallen below the national average and in every state and territory, compared to every state and territory except South Australia. So to come in here and claim that they are delivering for Victorians in terms of cost of living is an insult to every single Victorian. Every single Victorian. And why? Because of the inflationary impact of this government. The cost blowouts on the big build projects, $50 billion in cost blowouts that makes it basically unaffordable to buy a home in this state, to find a tradie in this state, because they are pushing up the prices at every opportunity. And why? Because they're funneling it to the CFMEU, their union mates, and to organised crime. That is what those opposite are complicit in every single day, is funneling it to organised crime on the taxpayer dime. To come in here and to claim that cost of living is what they are delivering for Victorians is a complete and utter insult. We see it every single day, whether it's the cost of energy in this state, small businesses that cannot continue to operate, whether it's the taxes. Today, another tax that has been hit on Victorians, another tax that is going to make it harder for Victorians to make ends meet. Just thinking about the taxes that are hitting our businesses, the increase in payroll tax, the increase in work cover premiums under this government. I don't know what the member for Nepean hears, but I'm yet to hear a business that has only suffered a 43% increase when it comes to work cover premiums. Cost of living is real. It is real, and it is because the Allan Labor government cannot manage money that every Victorian is feeling the pinch. every single Victorian is feeling the pinch because this government has no respect for taxpayers' money. No respect. They think it is a magic money tree, magic pudding economics, according to this government. But it cannot continue because Victorians cannot continue to be hit with these taxes. They cannot continue to pick up the bill because of this government. Housing in this state is unaffordable. And we come in here nearly every week and there's another piece of legislation when it comes to housing, another piece of legislation when it comes to housing. Yet we have not seen any impact when it comes to increasing the supply of housing in this state. We have not seen housing affordability actually become something that Victorians can dream of again. In fact, it's going in the opposite direction. On the day that the government announced their housing statement, they also announced a raft of new property taxes. How can you put out there that you are going to build 80,000 new homes a year, but at the same time, say you're going to introduce new taxes on the property sector? How on earth are those houses going to be delivered? And we know the answer. They're not going to be delivered. They're not going to be delivered because this government has walked away from that target. They have walked away from that target every day since. Acting Speaker, we hear time and time again from this government that cost of living, the education state, is absolutely their focus. But if you're a Victorian family sending your child to a school, you'd be thinking anything but. Anything but. We see crumbling facilities every single day. We see toxic mould in classrooms. Yeah. We see walls falling down. We hear regularly, I'm sure the member for Nepean hears regularly, that their classrooms are not air-conditioned. No. In fact, when we went to Red Hill Primary, they weren't heated.
Can't even close the windows.
They weren't heated. Weren't heated.
Can't even close the windows.
This government only looks after their pet projects and funnels money into political projects in their electorates. It is not governing for all Victorians, and Victorians continue to pay the price. And if we want to talk about incredible waste under this government, incredible waste when it comes to the education state, we saw this government introduce the Tutor Learning Initiative, a $1.2 billion program. Why? Why? Because they had to try and reverse the incredible impacts of the COVID school lockdowns, something that we are going to continue to see the tail of for many, many years to come. Now, the Auditor General actually looked into the Tutor Learning Initiative, the $1.2 billion program of taxpayers' money. And what did they find? They found the initiative did not significantly improve students' learning compared to similar non-tutored students. And I quote, Acting Speaker, I quote, "In fact, the Auditor General found that students who received tutoring learnt less than those who did not receive tutoring." So the $1.2 billion program that this government put in place saw students who were actually used the program, used the tutoring, learn less than those students who did not access the program. You cannot make this up. You cannot make this up. So whether it comes to upgrading facilities, leaving these projects unfunded, not delivering a fair share right across the state of Victoria, whether it's our teacher shortage crisis because they are the lowest paid teachers in the country, whether it is the fact that this government underfunds our schools so that we see that Victorian government schools have the least funding of any state or territory, this government is not delivering for students. It is not delivering for students. And let me just finish on another big claim from this government. This government talks a big game when it comes to their childhood, early childhood and education, their free kinder program. This program is going to see supposedly 50 early childhood centres open across Victoria. They were going to be delivered. They were going to be delivered by 2026, by 2027, by 2028. Well, what happened in the last budget, Acting Speaker? They were kicked out into the 2030s. kicked out to the 2030s, because this government cannot afford them. They cannot afford them. Now, these childcare centres are desperately needed in childcare deserts in regional Victoria in particular, and in Victoria's growth suburbs. Yet this government has kicked the can down the road once again. It's okay to focus on making sure we give another $1 billion here or there on a blowout on a major project, but when it comes to delivering what Victorians actually need, when it comes to making sure that Victorians have access to childcare, when it comes to making sure that we can see more women getting back into the workforce, this government decides, no, let's prioritise giving another $1 billion to the Westgate Tunnel. That is the reality of this government. When it comes to the free kinder program, another program that sounds terrific on TV, sounds terrific on an ad, but when it comes to actually putting it in place and delivering it for Victorians, what do we find? They haven't actually put any resources behind it. There's no funding to follow. So what does that mean? Many kindergartens, particularly sessional kindergartens run by local councils, cannot afford to deliver the program. I hear from local councils every single day, indeed from the member from Nepean's electorate, that cannot afford to be in the kinder space anymore. And they're thinking about actually exiting. What does that mean? What does it mean for those families that then cannot access places? Because this government is more focused on a political slogan on the eve of an election than actually delivering real policy that's going to deliver for Victorians. So whatever measure you look at, Acting Speaker, whatever measure you look at, this government is failing Victorians. Failing Victorians when it comes to delivering what they need in terms of cost of living relief. And to come in here tonight and say that Victorians are doing so well under this government, so well under the Minister for Education's watch, who is clearly more distracted about making phone calls to his colleagues about whether or not he's got their support to take over from the Premier, whether he's more focused on that than actually delivering in his portfolio.
Order. Member for Kew to continue.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. Whether he is more focused on speaking to his colleagues than actually delivering for Victorians, that the Minister for Education needs...
Member for Kew to take a seat. Member for Environment. Hang on, I'll call you Member for the Environment.
Point of order. I have a lot of time for the member for Kew, but she's actually impugning a member, and that's the Deputy Premier. He's absolutely committed to his job as Education Minister, and frankly, I would not be throwing stones from a glass house.
There's no point of order. Member for Kew to continue.
Thank you very much, and I'm pleased to see that the Minister for the Environment has put his support behind the Deputy Premier. Good to see. So the Minister for Education...
Order.
The Minister for...
Order. Member for Kew to continue.
Side.
Order. Member for Tarneit. Member for Kew.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. The Minister for Education needs to focus on doing his job. And let's just remember one recent example of where the Minister for Education had taken his eye off the prize. He claims that he learnt about the fact that this government is going to put high-risk youth offenders in mainstream classrooms from the Herald Sun. That's how across the brief the Minister for Education is. His department is briefing principals and teachers about the fact that this program is going to roll out in a matter of weeks. Yet how does the Minister for Education find out about it? In the Herald Sun on Saturday morning. That's how across his brief he is. So when it comes to delivering the education state, when it comes to making sure that students have access to the best possible schooling that they deserve, this government is letting it down. the lowest funded schools in the country, the lowest paid teachers in the country, 1 in 3 Victorian students that are not meeting the proficiency standards when it comes to literacy and numeracy. We are seeing parents being forced to pay more to send their students to school. Pay more. We know from recent data that Victorian families pay the 2nd highest in the nation when it comes to sending their children to a government school, the highest when it comes to primary schools. We on this side of the House are actually focused on how to deliver real cost of living relief, how to make sure that we deliver essential services that actually deliver for Victorians. Under this government, they cannot manage money, and Victorian students are paying the price.